Now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to our next moderator, our good friend, Constance Coleman. Constance, off to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to participate in this important event and this important conversation. Kicked off last year, the UN Food Systems Summit is an important opportunity to have a global conversation about the way we produce food for the billions of people across the planet. As one can see from the very diverse views expressed throughout the process, it's clearly a discussion to which the US food chain has a whole lot to contribute. Responding to the call for input, the private sector immediately engaged to share our experience, our goals, initiatives, and the learnings from our efforts to get to zero hunger by providing more high quality nutrition in a way that conserves our natural resources and supports our local communities. In our conversations, we have learned that our efforts and successes are not well understood, but that the best way to communicate our learnings is to share examples of that success. So today we have two individuals who capture that visionary effort. The first is Eric Jacobson. Eric is Vice President and General Manager of Cattle Operations and is responsible for ranching and feeding operations throughout North America, and also oversees long-term land use planning at desert ranches of Florida. Eric joined Ag Reserves in '87 before leaving to join Smithfield Foods in 1995. He came back, though, in 2006 to Ag Reserves as a general manager of the ranches in Florida. It's interesting, when you take a look at Ag Reserves, they are really working hard to integrate sustainability initiatives throughout their operations, including a focus on efficiency, resiliency, environmental responsibility, and on their team members and communities. Our second speaker is Dr. Michael McCloskey. He's co-founder and CEO of Select Milk Producers, the 6th largest milk cooperative in the country. He's also chairman of the board for Fair Oaks Farms, the nation's largest agritourism destination, located in Northwest Indiana. Dr. McCloskey has been instrumental in creating proprietary value-added dairy products, patented milk processing and dispensing systems, which led to the creation of Fairlife, which I'm sure you've seen in your grocery stores. It's a dairy-based health and wellness company, which is now solely owned by Coca-Cola. His home farm is Curtis Creek Dairy Farms, also in Northwest Indiana, which milks 15,000 cows. The farm is recognized as being one of the leading sustainability dairies in the US. Eric and Mike, if I may call you by your first names, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We just really want to have a conversation about the journeys that your two companies have been on and some of the learnings that you've had from that. Eric, is it all right if we start with you? I'd love to have you describe your sustainability story and where you've made some of the greatest progress to date.
Okay. Yeah, Constance, like you said earlier, we're primarily in the cow-calf business. So people who aren't familiar with that term, it's what you consider traditional ranching. So we have large landscapes of grasslands that we graze cattle on and raise calves that then go on into the supply chain, into stock operations and feeding operations. And we initiated development of a sustainability program back in 2016. And once we got the program kind of up and going, then we just tried to consistently refine it year after year after year. And our program is really kind of tied on 4 pillars of sustainability. And we talked a lot about the environmental pillar today, but we also have animal handling and welfare, we've got community and workers, and we've got the economic pillar. And we think that those 4 pillars are critical to create that balance that you need in running a company. And I would say that over the years, one of the things that I think the program has done as far as making us better at what we do is that we've learned to, I guess, develop more balanced plans. And as time went on, we have certain processes we go through to develop strategy and to develop our long-term planning, and even the way we do our standard operating procedures. And we started to structure all those programs around these 4 pillars. So at first, we kind of modified our strategy development template and centered it around those 4 pillars. Then we modified our planning templates and started centering them around those pillars. And the thing that I think has been really beneficial about that is, I think as a business, we are more balanced in the approach that we have to raising cattle now. We don't just think about economic, we also think about environmental, we think about animal welfare and handling, we think about people and community. And when you stay focused on those pillars and you develop initiatives in each one, I think it helps you manage a more balanced business. So it's been a real benefit to us over the years.
Sorry, the integration across of the sustainability idea throughout your operations. Do you find that your team members really embrace that and each have ownership for some of those sustainability goals and objectives?
Yeah, they really have. A good example is we put together a team to go through and update we call them our SOPs, or our standard operating procedures. And they came back to me with the idea of, let's organize those also around these 4 pillars. And so what we did is we rearranged our whole operating manual around these 4 pillars. And it's interesting the things that you learn as you do that, and you see where you have deficiencies and where you're doing okay. And so, yeah, our people have really embraced it. They understand it. And I think it's made us better at what we do.
Excellent. Mike, I'd love to turn to you at this point and have you share a little bit about the sustainability journey that you and your company have gone through, and where you've seen some of that progress.
Yes, thank you. Been a great day following all the discussions. I really have enjoyed it tremendously, and I think the focus on hunger has been just phenomenal. I thought the discussions there were great, and obviously tying that to the sustainability effort and climate is where we need to go. Something that I feel that we focused on for years at Fair Oaks Farms and at our dairy farms. So, but one of the things that really has helped our particular farms has been a collaboration of the entire dairy industry. Through some leadership at DMI and National Milk and others, we've been able to bring the industry together through the Innovation Center of U.S. Dairy and have a full focus on this sustainability effort. So being able to have those type of resources to invest into research, in creating real science through a life cycle assessment originally that we did in 2008, 9, and 10 through both the University of Arkansas and University of Michigan, kind of set a baseline of truly where we were at as dairy farmers, and specifically pinpointed where the low-hanging fruit may be, where the medium challenges were, and where the very difficult challenges were, and kind of gave us a roadmap of what we needed to develop technologies, processes, and research, because there are areas that really were lacking research to be able to achieve. So as we developed that through the early, 2012 to 17, and really got our handle around it, the entire organization, the Innovation Center, got to a point where we had a full understanding of what our opportunities are in greenhouse gas emissions specifically, but we did a lot of work on, continue to do a lot of work on water and nutrients and other issues that I'll talk about in a second, but specifically on greenhouse gas emissions, enough to be comfortable as leaders of the industry. We represent about the Innovation Center represents about 70% of the total milk production in the United States, both from a farm, but also from a processing level. So we have processors and producers, or co-op leaders sitting at that table. And we reached a level of comfort that we truly understood our journey, that we were able to commit to a net zero by 2050 jointly as an industry. What's interesting when you do that, and I think this was well discussed at the table, when an industry does that and puts that much effort into understanding the journey and truly has science and technologies and processes and research in play that will continue to develop and give us answers, you get to a point that you got to hand it over to the individual co-ops, the individual brands, the individual processors. So they got to make their own commitment. So you can make a commitment as an industry, but what really truly drives that, so it's pre-competitive up to that point, and the knowledge is shared pre-competitively. But then you get to a point where if you are going to drive it home and you're going to be successful, everyone who was involved through their own businesses have to make their commitment. And those commitments don't have to be the same. It does, just so that they have the same trend, everyone may have a different way to approach it. And that's very acceptable. But at the end of the day, we know that our goal as an industry is to be at net zero by 2050. And therefore, those organizations involved in our industry have to really be the ones that drive that home. So with that said, I'll get back into my particular dairy farm now, and I've been able to take advantage of the efforts of so many people within the industry to be able to bring that information back home and focused on our area. So the way we look at a dairy farm itself, we kind of break it down into 4 specific areas, obviously that have to do with greenhouse gas emissions. So we start with the crops. The crops are a big portion of our greenhouse gas emissions. It accounts for about 30 to 35% of our greenhouse gases. So we know that we need to focus on the whole crop area and what are the processes, the farming practices, the technologies that we need there. We've been defining those very well. We have a lot of great research going on that will continue to give us information on that. At the same time, there's the 3 others are the cow itself. So you're looking at enteric emissions of methane. So that accounts for about 30 to 35% as well of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So focusing, there's so much to be done in this arena right now. You can start thinking about feed additives and feed enhancers, right? But you can think about seeds and the value of better crop production and better seeds and better genetics that increase digestibility and obviously therefore increase productivity, but also decrease the amount of methane per unit produced. So that's very important. But also you look at the genetic potential of these cows, and there's 2 main ways using genomics of the cows that we're looking at. And one is that there are feed efficiency differences within our cows, and to be able to identify that genomically can have a tremendous impact on productivity and obviously reduced methane through that product. But at the same time, from a genomics point of view, we know that there's a great difference between the amount of methane that individual cows produce. So you can have the same cow eating the same, producing the same amount, but one cow emitting, quite a bit more methane than the other. So getting into that genomic selection, which, we're very advanced in our semen selection in all bovines, as you probably know. So adding that to our selection will be something that's going to be occurring here in the near future. And when I talk about that, I'm thinking over the next 5 to 7 years, while feed efficiency it's here already. We can already start choosing bulls on feed efficiency. So when you start adding all these things up, the forages that we feed, the grains that we feed, the 2 components of genetics that I shared with you, and you add on feed additives, both that will reduce directly methane, but others that will enhance the feed that we are feeding and make it more digestible. You can start thinking of animals that are producing 70% less methane. I don't have we're not there with scientific proof in this moment for me to use that, but from an additive scientific proof, if I take 40% here and 10 here and 20 here, if all that is additive, and it should be additive, and that's something that we will have to have the metrics and be able to prove it and measure it. And I think we'll have all that within the next 5 and 7 years as well. So there's a tremendous advantage. And I think what's important about the crop side that I shared earlier, where we got about 30% and we can reduce the crops to the point where we're sequestering carbon instead of emitting any greenhouse gases. So not only eliminate them through great farming practices, but at the same time sequester carbon on top of that. And then you take what I just shared with you on the enteric emission. This is not a thing about scale. Anyone can do this. You could do this with 100 acres and you can do this with one cow. Okay, so these are opportunities for the world, not something that you say, well, that's an American US farm, large scale farmer. Not necessarily. So it's nice that we can use all of this information and all this research and efforts, and it becomes available to all. So it was all done pre-competitive, and our goal is that everyone have access to it. The third area, obviously, is manure management, and manure management can be 25% or so of our methane emissions, and we have done fantastic work in this arena. At Fair Oaks, I've been involved in digester development since 2000, and produced electricity, produced fuel, developed 12-liter and 14-liter engines with Cummins and others to be able to transport our milk, and also participate in low carbon fuel standards, selling product or gas, clean renewable natural gas into that system. So we have 100% of our cows on digesters, so we're capturing 100% of whatever that impact of the manure was within our systems. And we take that even further now. We have technology that we are separating in the manure, being able to capture 90% of the ammonia and creating an ammonia fertilizer that's organic, certified organic already. And we have dirt creation out of that. That's 90% dry matter with a great nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium profile. So basically eliminating any emissions whatsoever, even after the digester that used to exist in the lagoon, we've been able to eliminate those as well. And then just to wrap up, the fourth one would be the energy used in production, like we all do. So whatever electricity you're using, whatever fuel you use in your tractors, and all that energy input, which is a very small percentage, believe it or not. People initially, when we started the LCA, we thought that would be a bigger impact, but it's only about 10 to 12% of the total impact. And in some operations, it's as low as 8%. So, but still an area that if you're producing your own electricity and you produce your own renewable natural gas and you start using those things, you eliminate that totally as well. So that's kind of the effort and the way that we break it down. Jeff says, hey, we got to keep this simple. And I believe that's the way we got to approach it. And I think if you approach it with those four, breaking the farm into those four areas, and you look for the science that has been created there, that there's an opportunity for everyone to really embrace this, not only in the United States, but around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now, I happen to have grown up on a cow-calf operation, Eric, and when I was growing up, no one would ever admit that dairy and beef were the same species. But I will say that I have since learned it, and clearly Mike is of the opinion that we can get to that climate neutrality in bovines. Would you agree with that? And what are your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, it would. And of course, the ranching environment is very different than the dairy environment. And, I was thinking as Mike was speaking, how to relate it to what we do. And, in a ranching environment, we have a cow unit, and a cow unit probably has, say, in the Sand Hills of Nebraska, about 18 acres per cow unit. And so one of the things that we focused on is soil health and forage productivity, and implemented really aggressive rotational grazing programs to try to maximize that. And probably one of the challenges in the ranching business is actually measuring the improvement, whether it's, so if you take a cow that produces a certain amount of methane and you take 18 acres that, is managed through a rotational grazing program, so you have these healthy soils and healthy forage bases, how much carbon does the 18 acres take in and relative to the amount of carbon that the cow produces? And I think if we manage right, we can get there. The other thing that we stumbled across too is that we've kind of focused on that, and then also a little bit on clean energy production, as we've, kind of scratched our heads on what we could do to reduce our carbon footprint under this environmental, pillar. We realized that we had some main power lines going through some of our ranches in different parts of the country, mainly in Florida and Texas. And we partnered with some utility companies and actually put in some utility scale solar applications on the ranches. So we have a number of these solar farms kind of scattered around. And it's a good fit with cattle ranching because you could take, say, a 50,000 acre operation and put 1,000 acres of solar on it, the utility scale solar, and it doesn't impact operations a lot, but it produces a huge amount of electricity. So, as of year to date, I think we're at about 250 megawatts worth of energy that we produce. And we've got another 300 under construction right now.
Right.
And we'll probably double that within the next 2 years. So it's kind of a niche that we've fallen on that fits well with our ranching. That is, kind of fits both in the economic pillar and the environmental pillar, a way to kind of diversify our ranching business. And really, we kind of picked the lower productive parts of the ranch to put the solar farms on. And then we tie them into that grid and they just go into the power grid, and the utility scale solar now is pretty efficient. I mean, you can produce electricity for about 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So anyway, that's something we stumbled across. But yeah, so ranching is going to be different, but we're, committed and, along with all the other things people have talked about, continuous improvement in genetics, continuous improvement in productivity. Our goal is to try to get our supply chain to that neutral level, which includes all of our ranches, our stock operations, and then we've got one feed yard at kind of the point of that pinnacle that all of our cattle flow through and then go on to the processor.
And I'm I have a follow-up question for you, Eric, and this is one that came from the audience, but it was one that was top of mind too when you laid out some of your sustainability priorities, and that is, how does animal welfare and well-being, you mentioned animal welfare, including the need to provide for natural environments and natural behaviors. How do you manage that in your sustainability plan?
Yeah, one of the things, and like I said, as you start to focus your planning on these different pillars, it creates some thought on initiatives that you need to implement. And one of the things that we started after we did this is a really comprehensive animal handling and welfare program, and that includes onboarding training, it includes ongoing quarterly training, it includes annual training that our people go through. And I think it's made us much better stockmen. Some of the guys that worked for us in the past said in the past, when what we call work cattle, we put them through the crowds and all that. It was always about going faster. And what we found now that we actually have kind of slowed down, learned to handle the cattle more carefully, and by going slower, we kind of go faster because the cattle respond better that way. And so I think we've become really good stockmen in the process of doing that. And then another kind of collateral benefit from that is that, we implemented some pretty comprehensive worker safety programs. And so our accident rates have gone way, way down when you combine the animal handling and the worker safety. And our lost time accident rates are now half the industry average, where they probably were above industry average before. So there's kind of these collateral benefits that you get from, implementing a comprehensive sustainability program, because one thing kind of leads to another, and these benefits accrue. And so yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's made us better ranchers as we've taken the time to really think it through, put a program in place, and then make that program part of the DNA of our organization. So it's not just kind of a program off to the side, it's embedded in all of our strategy and planning and everything that we do now.
Excellent, thank you. So Mike, you talked about the role that DMI and the dairy industry kind of played in helping you arrive at your goal and your approach and program. And Eric, Ashley Peterson with U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, yep, just posted in the chat the industry's goal of getting to climate neutrality by 2040. So clearly you both have resources from within your industry that's kind of working and providing some tools. What other things are critical, or engagement from others that is critical to help you achieve your goals? Is there a role for government to enable producers to achieve climate neutrality? Who else needs to be at the table for you all to really get it across the finish line? Yeah,
that's a great question. So so the there's no way that any of this can be implemented unless we find an economic solution to it as well, right? I mean, all this is, we live in a commodity world, and we can't ask farmers to implement technologies and practices that are going to cost them more than what their cost of production is today. I think Eric pointed out very well. There's a lot of these things that we can implement that they within themselves create efficiencies. I think he gave some great examples of those. So that's number one. We really, I mean, why weren't we doing this before, right? So that's the simplest question. And wow, you know, you spend years at something, you say, wow, why I should have been doing that before. And there's a lot of that in what we're talking about here. So that's number one. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. It's easy to accept and get your people to embrace it, and your organization as a business unit to embrace it as well. But then there are situations that need some type of incentive, and you know, these carbon markets have to exist. Right now in the digester world, what's really making it take off is the low carbon fuel standards set by California at this particular moment, which is very, very well priced, very attractive to all of us. Really has, you know, I've been in the digester business since 2000, like I shared earlier, and there were hardly any digesters being built because we tried to do it on electricity and we tried to do it on different ways. But now that there is a low carbon fuel standard, there's over 200 digesters being implemented and built right now in the United States. So economic incentives are important to make this happen. I see carbon values increasing dramatically over the next 2 to 3 years. I see methane within the carbon values. I see methane being one of the, obviously the most attractive because of the impact it can have on climate neutrality, and therefore I see that we in the business with cattle, we have a special advantage that's coming our way from an economic point of view. I really believe that we will be pleasantly surprised with the value of methane reduction over the next 2 to 3 years. And we need to push that as an industry, and we need to work with policymakers, both at the federal level and the state level, to make these things happen and give them the right direction, because they don't happen by themselves. But the willingness is there, and the understanding is starting to be there of the value of incentivizing this. So that, I think that's very important. The other one is producing new products. Like I shared, right now we are capturing 100%, 90% of the ammonia, which, you know, ammonia has been going to atmosphere truly since the dinosaurs. So, you know, and we've been using ammonia fertilizers coming out of the fossil fuel industry. We can transform that totally from the cattle industry. You know, and there's very high, good concentration of ammonia that can be captured, turned into aqueous ammonia fertilizers that are organic in nature, and therefore bring a high market value, but also have reduce your carbon input at the farm level tremendously, because you're not using a fossil fuel to fertilize your fields. You're using a renewable fuel that you've created from that. But also the organic nature of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in manure, as we learn how to fractionate it and how to separate it out of the streams, and all this is going to happen, and we concentrate these. There's no reason for mining all of this phosphorus that we mine and potassium that we mine, because we can recycle it, you know, because we have tremendous amount when you look at the amount produced. So creating new products at the dairy farm level is a source of income that we need to include in this as well. And then, you know, one of the big ones is, can we move this up the value chain? It's hard, you know, it's not easy. You know, I've been in marketing my entire life, as you shared with a little while ago. And it's not easy to go and get this out of the consumer, because we are in a very competitive environment. But I think things are aligned in the proper manner where we have to focus on that as well. and create, get some value as we move through the value chain. The problem is a lot of these products will be turned, in our case, is turned into powders. And as they may move through 5 or 6 people until they finally become an ingredient in some product, right? And that's a big percentage of the milk produced in the nation. So how the traceability of that and to be able to gain access to some recognition in that in the value chain is going to be a little more difficult than when you're dealing with a brand name such as Fairlife and you're going directly to your product there. It's easier because you're getting closer to the consumer and it's direct. So there's some challenges there that we need to work out, but we need to focus on that too, because this is what the consumer wants. This is what they demand. If we communicate properly and they truly understand what we're doing at the farm level and the society values that we're bringing at the farm level, I believe that you'll be able to achieve premiums out of that. And lastly, I bring this societal concept up. I believe that through our farm bills, we need to focus in Title I and II. We need to focus on the societal values that we bring, and and compensate people that are doing the right thing, especially in the crop side of the world. I think that we have great crop insurance programs. Can they be enhanced or tied into doing the right, a better pricing structures? There's a lot of ideas that we can create within how we distribute money and help to farmers in this country that would be better incentivized if you're doing the right things as far as reducing that climate emission, and you get a better deal to say on your crop insurance or on something else because you made a special effort. And that's a societal recognition, because when you start looking at biodiversity and all the other great things that farming will produce in the future, I truly believe that a good source of our income of our net income, of our bottom line income, will be assisted by these societal values that we just went over, all of them, and that the commodity product will be a very important component, obviously, but the complement of this other income is how I see the transition of better income for farmers in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Eric, yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that is I think that the industry groups do play an important role of creating some unity, within the industry. And so if you look at our program, it's aligned with, the work the National Cattlemen's Association has done and the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And the metrics are specific to our operations, but at least, there's kind of a framework there we could use to create some unity. So we're kind of all headed in the same direction. And so I think that's an important role that they play. And it was helpful for us as we developed our program because we could align with that and then customize the metrics, under each one of those pillars for our particular operation.
And the value that Eric brought up earlier as well, which I just think is, just how do you measure it? It's the rural impact of the communities and what's happening there. I just think that this is, a recognition that when you're doing the right thing in the community and we're taking care of our animals, taking care of the environment, taking care of the employees, and investing in those communities and the vibrancy of that, of what that means for the country, all of these things, will add up to a recognition, a societal recognition that is extremely important as we move forward.
So what advice then would you offer to companies that are just starting their sustainability journey?
Me to go first, Mike?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think you just have to get started. We weren't sure where to start. And I remember, back that many years ago, people were talking about sustainability, and in some ways it was a little bit hard to define. I think we knew what it was. I think we all knew what it was, but we couldn't, it was hard to put a definition to it. And so we just started. I remember having a debate on, how do we even start this? And we had the general guidelines from the, Global Roundtable, and, we hired some people to help us and that were working in that space and had some more experience. And we just put together a program. And then once we had the program put together, like I said, programs, if they're just kind of scabbed on to everything else you do, they're just kind of the program off to the side. But we started figuring out how to pull that in and making it part of what we do every day. And to me, that makes a big difference. People in our organization, in some ways, they don't even need to know we have a sustainability program, even though they do, because if they just utilize our SOPs and our plans and everything we do, they're doing our sustainability program. Does that make sense? So I guess my advice would be, just get started, document a program, and then figure out how to incorporate it slowly kind of make it part of your organization. And then you start seeing benefits from it as time goes on.
Yeah.
I think absolutely just start. That's what it takes, like in anything. And I think that's a great description. But also, 13 years ago when we started, we didn't have a clue. I mean, as an industry, really what we knew we had to do something. The information that has been developed in industries like the dairy and the beef industry and the swine industry and others that have been doing this now for whatever, some longer, some not so long, but long enough. It's great information. It's amazing information compared to where we were 10 years ago. So there are great roadmaps that already exist. So don't reinvent the wheel either, right? I mean, there's great information already out there, which is what, when you listen to Jeff's call to action, and we're talking 2 to 3 years to really get very serious about this, so we can define the decade yet. Some people may look back and say, man, that's just a lot of work, and I don't think we can do that. I say the contrary. I say we can do it because of all the work as we look back that's been done. And yeah, it looked like a struggle back then, but it's very clear today. It's straightforward. We know what we don't know, and we know what we do know, and we know what's in between that we're trying to work out. So there is a lot of information out there. I think I recommend producers to really try to access that information through their industry, and then even cross industries. But just start, like Eric said. You got to start.
You just got to start. One of the questions that I've gotten from several companies and individuals is, sustainability is a big topic, right? It's very difficult. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. And one of the questions I've gotten is, can I just start with one area? Can I just decide this is what I'm going to focus on for sustainability? This is going to be my story. Does that work as well? Or do you feel like you've got to look at this as a whole, or can you just take a piece of it and get started in that effort to just start?
I think a piece is great. I mean, just take a bit, like in everything, play to your strength, understand your weaknesses, but play to your strength, right? So find a piece that you can make some advances, know where you're weak, and work on that behind the scenes as you work that up, and use your strength to be able to support your weaknesses. So yes, I think, you start where you feel you can do and have the best impact.
Yeah, I think the other thing you can do too is if you do take the time to kind of think through, what are your main areas that you need to focus on, instead of being overwhelmed by the 20 things you ought to do under each area, just like Mike said, just pick one, just say, okay, this year I'm going to work on, this one under animal health and welfare, and this one under environmental, and this one under community and workers. And, just hammer away at it until you accomplish it, and then pick the next one. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed if they see, well, here's 20 metrics we're going to track, and, they just throw their hands up like, it's too much.
Yeah. So what are some of the learnings then? I mean, with that kind of thing in mind, there's also the whole idea of you guys are in a developed country with advanced systems in place. How do we translate some of that to developing systems in developing countries?
That's why I wanted to make the point of that a lot of what I was sharing with you a little while ago is you could do it in one cow or 1,000, right? So there are a lot of things that translate into developing countries that can be used. That's where they got to start. They got to start with the simple stuff that we can do to help them reduce. But but they need to, like, I think there were some great discussions earlier. We need to figure out, how do we make them more robust, more resilient? How do we, how do these operations become more sustainable in all the sense of the word? Because there is a lot of fragile, very fragile operations out there that are susceptible. So, that effort that was well discussed in the previous panel, I think is part of that answer.
Yeah. So what's next, you two? What's your next, what are you looking at next in your sustainability journey?
For us, we're just going to continue to refine our program. We go through an annual review. We just finished it. We had all of we didn't have our feed yard pulled into that program yet. And so we went through and developed metrics for it and pulled it in this year. So now we have our whole supply chain in the program. Yeah, I think, I don't know that I have anything specific to say other than we just kind of keep hammering away at refining the program and refining our metrics, figuring out which ones really have an impact and which don't. And then I think the biggest thing, and we had a conversation about this morning, is on the ranching side, just trying to figure out or perfect how to measure improvement. Where animals aren't in confinement and you can't enclose things and capture things and things like that. So being able to say, okay, we've implemented these different strategies and now can we measure whether or not we got real improvement? We can measure theoretical improvement, but as time goes on, can it become more of a real measured improvement, if that makes sense? So that, I think, is one of the things that we're going to tackle next.
I think for us, we're very strong on the manure side in the dairy business. We're understanding that very well. We need to drive it down to smaller farms. I think we have some great plans with e-RINs and other things that we can do to be able to drive digesters down to 500, 300 cow dairies. So we're working hard on that. But the technology, when I started in 2000, it truly was a snake oil salesperson technology, and today it's robust, and we really got that down very well. And the post digester, we have great technology that we developed in the last 5 years. Like I shared with you, we can now capture all the ammonia. We can dry the product. We get rid of lagoons. It just is transformational of what we can do in that area. The enteric side, we really need a big effort with FDA. This is a serious issue, and we just need everyone that's joining in this effort, and then some. We just need to move the needle with FDA. They got to recognize that they have an antiquated system. Since 1998, it hasn't been revised. And as far as a pathway for food additives, we need to recognize the importance of this. We need to recognize that some great products have just been approved in Brazil and Chile. They're about to be approved in Europe and New Zealand. These are competition to our exports. We can't allow, we just have to make sure that we can compete. So we need our FDA. We got a big focus on that, and
Mike, that's the #1 priority for the American Feed Industry Association. I can definitely share that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that, to me, it's my #1 priority. When you say what's next for me, I am incredibly focused from the dairy side on that. Everyone that I work with in the dairy industry knows that, and everyone's keen to that. So that's a big focus. We need to continue to work on the genetic side on enteric, so that's great. But an area that I shared earlier that needs some great work, and I think we're doing some great work, and we have tens of millions of dollars that we've been able to get to invest in, that is on the crop side, and how do we truly get the right measurements and truly understand, what are we reducing in emissions and what are we sequestering and what is the value of all of that? Because sooner or later that has to be monetized in one way or another. We've got to prove that we're truly sequestering, that we truly stopped emissions, and we need to be able to get value for that. And without science, without solid science that does not exist today, without that solid science, you can't expect to be able to achieve those goals. So that's a big goal. That's about a 5 to 8 year research program that we started already, and we're very focused on. I think it'll be excellent work. So that's a big deal for us in the dairy industry next. And I think that then you get into water and you get into nutrients and clean water and which is, extremely important. I think we're doing some great technology there as well and great advancements there over the next, 3 to 5 years.
And that's some of the societal benefits you were talking about before.
Sure.
That kind of came up, right? So I think we've got time for one more question. And I'm going to share with you that tonight I'm going to go down to my refrigerator, get out my jug of Fairlife milk. I'm going to throw a burger on the grill and I'm going to add some cheese to it because I can't have a burger without cheese. So if dairy and beef can share some space on my plate at home, do you think that there's some opportunity for dairy and beef to kind of come together and work and share some learnings from each of those each sector on how we get there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was great. That was a great way to pose that question because that's what it's about, right? So I appreciate that. Yeah, without a doubt, I think that we're learning, all of us, to collaborate a lot better. The need for that, the value of it is, it truly, it's us against them.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is. We have to understand that as agricultural people that are in animal protein production, that it truly is that. And we have to recognize each other and work together and collaborate, share information. So I appreciate you bringing that up 100%.
Excellent. Eric?
No, I agree. We actually own a dairy. We have about a 5,000 cow dairy down in southern Utah, and we've been able to create some synergies between that and our beef supply chain because, with the technology you can use on sex semen for your female matings, we do the bulk of the mating, the rest of the matings to a beef breed, and then we just work those calves into our supply chain. And so from an animal welfare handling standpoint, it's made a really viable product out of what in the past maybe was less viable. And so our dairy and our beef operations actually are pretty integrated at this point. They work really closely together. So
yeah, I would say that all the dairies that we're involved in is we're probably 50% of our calves are black calves. So we have become an integral part of the beef business as well from that standpoint of view. Absolutely.
Yeah, we probably push the envelope even further than that because we can run those black cattle right into our supply chain, and they perform amazingly consistently well.
Yeah.
They're much
Oh my
more.
gosh, it's going to be rough when I go home and tell people that they are the same species.
Yeah, we're coming together.
That's right.
You got 9 million mother cows out there that are going to join the many million. I don't know if it's 20 million or what the number is of mother cows. How many? 30
million.
30 million mother cows. So we got 9 million that somewhere better than half should become part of the beef industry.
Turning the dairy cows into beef cow. No.
There you go. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. When we talk about what the private sector is doing and what industry is doing, you two are prime examples of where the rubber meets the road. And this is happening. And we talked earlier, and Jeff mentioned earlier that we are doing it. We know we can do it, and we are doing it. And you two are perfect examples of that. We're going to continue to carry that message globally. And the fact that we can point to examples like yours is very, very critical to being able to explain how it can happen everywhere. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your openness and candor and talking through some of the different challenges.